Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through Scottish Prism. Election special. We're calling this Devastation, Delusion and Devolution. And I think that sums up this election for us Scottish independence supporters, because the numbers down south have been devastated because of their delusion, and their delusion they tried to get us to follow on, and they've been supporting devolution, not independence. And that's why we are where we are. Now, this programme and many other programmes and the bloggers, one of my guests, one of the other bloggers, and all wings, everyone has been trying to tell them for years now this was coming. They didn't listen, and it's happened. So let's get the gang in and let's get talking about it, because there's lots to talk about and lots for us to discuss. So I'm joined by the heroine of the show, the lady from Alloa and Grangemouth, our favourite lawyer. It's our Eva. Eva, how are you? Exhausted, love?
I'm tired insofar as we're recording this on Friday night, and I've been up since about the back of 5 on Thursday morning. But I'm not devastated. I'm not down. I'm determined that we're not going to settle for devolution, whether that's in its current form or in some other revised form. And I think that the lessons that we're learning from the last few days are going to stand us in good stead for the Concerted campaign.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you should be proud of yourself. And we'll talk about that later, because you got a fantastic result from a standing start without a party round about you. You did brilliantly. And once we get the crew in, I think we should have a standing ovation for you. And who is that? Of course, we've got Mr. Quinnan from over there in Old Reekie. Mr. Quinnan, yeah, you're on mute. You owe me a quid already. Fabulous.
That's just typical, isn't it? Great to see you, Eva, and well done for fighting the correct cause.
Correct. And needless to say, he's in a pub in Brussels. It's our Phil, Mr. Basil. Corporate Cavalier. He owes me a quid as well.
I forgot I put the mute on. It normally turns off automatically, but I put it on myself this time, so it didn't go off automatically. Dope. Another Homer Simpson moment.
How are you?
Splendid. Saddened, but what happened? I mean, I don't want to say I told you so and all that type of thing, but yeah, we know. We said, yeah, we did. And everybody told them, and it was so obvious. And now the majority was still over 50% of Scots wanting independence, and the SNP got what they deserved. And the sad thing about it is, it's our party that we built, and it's been destroyed by the greed, selfishness, and ignorance and the betrayal by a small group who currently control the SNP, and that's why SNP have been kicked in the hom-os.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it. And we've got him back, the old Paisley Mohawk himself, Mr. Salvo. Mr. Lawson, how are you?
Very well indeed, and delighted that the circus is finally finished. And unlike Lloyd, who doesn't want to tell them, I told you so, I do want to say, I told you so, repeatedly, as did many other people. You chose to ignore it. Worse, you chose to attack the folk that were your friends, that were telling you what was going to happen, and you paid the price last night, and you deserved it.
Yeah. The question is, will they listen now, Ian? And that's what we're going to be talking about as this show goes on. If I could start with you, Eva, because you were really in the heat of the battle, and as I say, I think I want to give you the applause you deserve, because you put a great show from 0 to 2.6. Is that right? 2.6 you got?
2.2, I think.
2.2. I don't want to over-exaggerate or under-exaggerate, but 2.2, which is more than the Alba party managed, or not just in your seat, but anywhere, with the exception of Neil Handy, a sitting member of Parliament who got 0.6 more than you. More than the ISP party. You didn't have a party round about you. It was a standing start. You were doing it on your own. It was just a fantastic result under the circumstances. And I'm sure if we'd had longer, we would have done even more. But you should be really proud of yourself. I hope you are.
Thanks, Roddy, but I'm more proud of the people that were round about me, including everybody here and all the folk that were out on the streets with me, because there was some team that were regularly leafleting, chapping doors, coming out into shopping centres, driving around, doing PAs, designing stuff. And, you know, I don't want to single out any one particular individual, but you know perfectly well my partner Matt has pounded the streets and walked miles delivering stuff and speaking to folk. But other people, particularly Sally, Alan, Annie, Alan and Brenda and Dennis, who came from miles away under their own steam to help me, was very much appreciated, in addition to the local folk who turned out practically daily. But the common denominator on the doorsteps and in the streets was that people were and remain scunnered with political parties, and that's what the results bear out. That they need to have somebody in whom they can place their trust, and I'm not convinced that that's the result that this election has given.
Lloyd, we talked about it during the campaign. It was a really strange one because there was no sort of general theme to it. You know, there was no Falklands War, there was no Brexit or anything like that. It was a really, I don't know, it was just an election that without a theme. But the result wasn't unexpected. It was worse, I think, than some of us did expect. But as Ian alluded to, it was well deserved what happened to the SNP. £2.
I'm behaving like the SNP now. I feel sorry for the people who were not motivated enough to go out and vote yesterday, particularly those who are SNP supporters and, more importantly, independent supporters who had nowhere to go yesterday. And I think also I found it very, very difficult to listen to the last 24 hours chitter-chatter by the middle-class political classes of Scotland and of England talking about a game, talking about something that they're a part of and the people are entirely and completely excluded from. The biggest thing for me was this exposed again the vacuity at the centre of the Scottish National Party leadership. A failure to understand history, a failure to understand the ground upon which they're fighting. And again, like the 11 SNP MPs in 1974, who 10 of the 11 lost their seat in the 79 election because they had lost touch entirely with the movement, with the membership, and had become completely sucked into the system of Westminster. This time round, that has been writ large. And effectively, we're in the same situation. The SNP failing to understand that this was an English election. The whole basis of this entire election was what the result was going to be in England. That was a foregone conclusion, which opened up great ground for the SNP to exploit. They chose not to. The idea that in some ways, a voice at Westminster, when a child can tell you by the pure arithmetic of the Houses of Commons that no matter how many members of Parliament you send from Scotland to Westminster, they will never have the majority. They will never influence who or what the government is. And the fact of the matter is their inability to analyse what their purpose is, and more importantly, the forces that they're ranged against, has left a huge number of people in this country today deeply saddened and quite depressed. And what's more important, and this is very important for us as well, because we have a part to play in this, we have to move forward, a manner in which we can re-galvanise the people. And I would suggest that a proper analysis of both the 74 to 79 SNP group and the current SNP group created between 2015 and now is absolutely essential. A restoration of internal party democracy is the only way that will be done with any level of honesty whatsoever. And unfortunately, as I look at the remnants of the leadership of the Scottish National Party, the ones that are left are the very ones who do not want an empowered membership, the very ones who have destroyed the power of the SNP, because the power of the SNP was boots on the ground, motivated people who understood the party message and were happy to go and cheer it and take it to the doors. More importantly, and this is a really crucial part of this, when your members are motivated, they speak to other people. Other people become motivated, and you deliver what happened in 2014 and 2015 and failed entirely to do this time, because the removal of power and democracy from the ordinary members of the party has led to the SNP becoming but a shadow of a very cheap and nasty British political party, fighting in British political terms, on British political ground, which is the very opposite of what you should do in your situation. Never, ever fight on your enemy's ground. Fight only on your own. And this time, John Swinney and the leadership of the party conceded utterly before a single cross was put on a ballot paper.
Ian, you wrote a great article this week when you expected them to keep 20 seats, approximately. But you must have even been shocked at the way they fell. 29.9% of the vote. We figure that over 500,000 pro-independence supporters stayed at home, unenthused by any of the independence parties. It really is quite upsetting.
Yeah, my bottom figure was 17, but the cabal managed to surpass themselves and take it down to 9 or 10. I think, you know, analysing this, I mean, this party's had a strategic bypass for at least the last decade. But analysing this goes back to the last Scottish elections, where instead of taking a Scottish United approach and having SNP 1, ALPA 2, and creating a supermajority, the SNP selfishly, because they wanted to control independence solely by themselves, opted for SNP 1 and 2. Now, not only did that mean that hundreds of thousands of SNP list votes were in the bin, they only elected 2 list members from hundreds and hundreds and thousands of votes. But what worse than that, they created dozens of Labour and Tory MSPs, which created the platform for Sarwar and Ross, the credible platform. The Scottish public seen them. They seen they had a number of people behind them. What should have been behind them, if the SNP hadn't been so selfish and stupid, would have been an unrecognisable rump of a few Labour survivors and a few Tory survivors. But Nicola Sturgeon handed them that opportunity. You know, so that's the mistake goes back to then. And it's continued ever since. It's been one mistake after the other. You need 2 things to be successful in a campaign. You need to display competence, and you need to have a set of policies that relate to the Scottish public, that resonate with them. The SNP had neither. They were totally incompetent, absolutely stupid. They were hung up on Stonewall policies that were completely opposed by the vast majority of Scottish people. So they were, as far as most people were concerned, they were an alien party. They certainly weren't a Scottish party. And that's why people never turned out. Lloyd's exactly right. This is 2017 all over again. You know, the independence vote, a lot of it stayed home. The rest of it, there was no enthusiasm to vote SNP because no one thought there was a message that was worth supporting. And they caused that. They caused it. And they've been very, very aggressive against people that warned them about this. But they're not so aggressive this morning because all of a sudden, you know, they're going to have to answer for some of it. But don't let anyone think it will be easy to sort, because while they were ignoring all these things, they were very busy changing the internal mechanisms, you know, to make sure that even if you wanted rid of them, you would find it very, very difficult, because when they ignored the election, they didn't ignore looking after themselves.
Yeah, there's the one. Well, there's no one here smiling, no one laughing. I mean, it was absolutely necessary for the SNP to take a bit of a hit, Phil. However, you can see how upset Nicola Sturgeon was last night on television. You stick up the picture or the screenshot of her as the results are coming in, saying we're down to 10 seats, Nicola. And this is what Nicola said. There you go. My check's been paid. I'm happy. It kind of sums it up. And she, of course, is in denial. Nothing to do with her, Phil. Yeah. Nothing to do with her. It was, there's another one we'll put up in a minute or two where she was saying we didn't put independence front and centre.
Beggars belief. I mean, she's betrayed us. She knows she's betrayed us. And, you know, and I listened to the sage advice that we got earlier on from Lloyd, Eva, and Ian. It was like listening to never fighting your enemy's ground. It's like listening to Song Sue and Clausewitz, and these are basic fundamentals. The logistics wins wars, and it's about funding. It's about boots on the ground. It's about the supply chain that gets your message out to the people. And none of that was in place. We all knew it. We all knew how it worked because we were part of the success that we built into the SSNP party. And Angus Robertson, the one who actually removed the vote from the people from the when we went to conference and we used to vote for things, and they happened. They happened because it was called democracy within the party, all removed deliberately by those who basically have sold us out. And I'm so angry at what we see because and so saddened by what it is. They know exactly what they did. They're not stupid. We can't accuse Angus Robb. I've worked with these people very closely. Not so much Nicola. She really, really feared the 56. She feared the power because the MPs seem to have bigger influence and bigger say and sway, because the world's perception is the Scottish Government are a council, because that's what they are. When you look at the devolved powers versus the reserved matters, they are a big council. And it's like, and one of the things was, and obviously Lloyd get fined £2 tonight, which is about the same as the SNP spent on the whole bloody election. Why? Because that's all they had. Because they screwed up. They screwed up and they betrayed us, and we stopped giving them money. Many of us walked away. Many of us spread this message. So we're sitting at 50, consistently still 50% of the Scottish people, over 50% of the Scottish people want independence, and we did not turn up for a party that betrayed us. And that's the bottom line. We know it. They know it. Because the historical references that Lloyd has quoted are bang on the money, and we talk about them. We know about them. When you're in management meetings with the SNP on policy, or when I was at Westminster, obviously, there were several meetings we had. The early days in particular, when we were actually listened to, like the debate in fox hunting, when everybody actually got a say, all 56 of us got a chance to speak, and most of us took it. Nicola almost lost that. She almost lost control because she allowed us to speak. It never happened again. Now, that should have been a telltale sign. That should have been a warning sign to all of us. And I went in with my management experience. I'm running a team here that I'm paying big money to do difficult things. And I'm struggling to get them to do what I'm paying the big money. And this is why the whole herding cats philosophy when you run political parties comes into play, because you look at volunteers, educated, driven people who are principled, many of them. And that's what you end up doing. You end up trying to get these clear-thinking volunteers to do something that they know is wrong, and that's where the SNP went wrong here, because we know they were wrong. And originally my doubts when I first went in, I run big teams, and I went in, there's 56 of us, the 6 that were here before, or however many there was, have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how to run management and manage teams. Why? Because like most MPs, most of them are in it for themselves. Most of them are only caring about their own backsides and their own greasy pole climbing. That's the name of this game. And the management of perception is how you get there. So no, it didn't change. And another reason I call this the hand the baton election, because Conservatives know what's coming down the line with BRICS and the crash that's coming and the major challenges to the British economy and the European economy. It's happening in Europe. And what the Tories have done deliberately is hand the baton. It's time to hand it over to the Red Tories. Now Labour will carry the can for the shit that's about to come down the turnpike. Even though it's made by the same neocons that control both parties now, it's the same as it does in America. It's just we're turning it into that organisation. And the SNP equivalent on this, they have become that which we fought. They have become another arm of the establishment. And until we root them out, root and branch, we need to get rid of the Angus Robertsons, the Nicolas, as Lloyd pointed out, most of the 8 or 9 or 9 or 10 that are still there are the people you do not want to be in power. They're the worst of us. We lost some good people in this election, but they weren't strong enough, and they lacked the gumption and the balls to stand up for what's right, and they too have paid the price for the party that is the SNP's betrayal of the people of Scotland.
I mean, the Tories took a bit of beating as well. I noticed you didn't mention Miss Mordaunt. I thought you may have the possible future Mrs. Boswell. She's out of work, but there you go. We'll come back to that one. Eva, today I didn't get encouraged because I was listening to the Swinney man. It should be Swiddle, or what was the name we gave him? I can't remember. We gave him a good nickname last week, right, Phil? But he's saying, you know, the old story, you know, we have to convert more soft nose because, you know, that's where we went wrong. It's absolutely ridiculous. Every opinion poll for the last 2+ years has shown a majority in favour of independence. It's not convincing soft nose that's the problem. It's convincing the soft arses on the seats to get their arse in gear. That's the problem.
Look, we know, everybody knows, the SNP and the independence movement, if it remains tied to the SNP, are doomed for as long as the cold hands of Swinney and Sturgeon, and sadly also Stephen Flynn, remain on the tiller. That's just a simple fact. It was made more obvious last night in watching Nicola Sturgeon's performance as she cozied into, of all people, George Osborne and Ed Balls. Ed Balls, who, guilty with his wife of flip-flopping their expenses relative to the homes that they resided in when they were both elected members at Westminster, and they raked in hundreds of thousands of pounds in expenses when the people of the United Kingdom, and the part that we're most interested in Scotland, were quite literally hungry and cold and afraid. These are the people that Nicola Sturgeon chose to be with on a night when she knew perfectly well that her party, and thereby Scotland, were going to take an absolute drubbing that she was going to be asked to comment upon in the face of people who actually should be the enemies of her country. She chose to be there beside these folk because these are the people she wants to be around. And what she's done is not simply betrayed her party or her country. What she's done as the result of her conduct over the last 10 years, including her continued control of the party, is to make sure that those people of Scotland who are disadvantaged or disenfranchised, either metaphorically or actually, feel as if they are without hope. But they are without hope when there is no leadership with a cogent plan and real change on the agenda, but not change for change's sake, but change in the context of being able to deliver people out of the dependent state that Scotland currently is. And for as long as folk watch the likes of Nicola Sturgeon or John Swinney or Stephen Flynn and listen to them as they spout utter, complete garbage, Scotland will not get out the bit. They've been told often and often enough. A case in point is John Nicholson. For the last few years, he's been vilified quite correctly because of his attitude towards women, because he has called women all sorts of names simply because they've stuck up for their own rights. Well, he got what he deserved last night. He lost his majority of a few thousand and ended up being beaten by a good 6,000 or so. That happened as the result of his own conduct and the conduct of the leadership of his party. He's only got himself to blame, and so have the rest of the SNP. I'd make a notable exception for Joanna Cherry, obviously, but otherwise, the rest of them were told, and they did damn all about it other than to cling on to the wreckage, knowing that the outcome was absolutely inevitable. But the outcomes for them last night and today, we were supposed to have sympathy for them for losing their jobs. We were supposed to have sympathy for their staff for losing their jobs. The hard fact of the matter is that in the course of this campaign, most SNP candidates only had their staff, their paid staff, working for them out on the streets because they didn't have activists. And most of campaign activity comprised paid staff doing press releases and tweets talking about the positive messages on the doorsteps. Didn't they get positive messages on the doorsteps? What they got was their head in their hands to play with over and over again because people were telling them that they were sick, fed up with the stagnant state of Scottish politics. And it'll remain stagnant unless and until we've got leaders who tell the truth. And the truth is not about spinning what this election result might mean or could be manipulated to somehow imply further down the road, particularly when we head towards 2026. The truth is that if there was a desire within John Swinney's heart for independence, not only would he step aside, he would be intent on collapsing the Holyrood Parliament and having, in essence, a de facto referendum on independence. It's the Angus Brendan McNeill plan that we've spoken about incessantly. Of course, the argument just now will be we can't do that because we wouldn't win it. It would be a gift to the Unionists. But it would be one if there was a proper drive amongst the people of Scotland who are crying out for it to happen. Because what they don't want is a repeat of the last 10 years where we're led up the hill with promises of a convention or a referendum and no ifs and no buts and the dates in the calendar, and another 50 front pages of the National dangling carrots. There needs to be a real determination this time to make it happen. And there is no evidence of that whatsoever.
No, there's none. Here's the thing, Lloyd. Not only did the SNP take a beating last night, now I found it strange or uncomfortable that the Reform Party took 165,000 votes out of Scotland. Now, the Alpa Party, who should have been making hay while the sun was shining with the SNP dipping, they should have been scooping up. The result was appalling, atrocious. The ISP didn't make a dent. They're not even mentioned in dispatches. The independent supporters have said to the independence parties, a plague in all your houses. They haven't been endeared by any of them. They haven't been enthused by any of them. They should all be worried.
Yeah, but there's the party we forget that's part of the independence movement, or claims to be, which in 2003 had 7 members of the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Socialist Party. Where was the Scottish Socialist Party last night? I fear that we end up getting into the same kind of analysis that is effectively analysis of British politics, right? And I don't want to go there. And I don't want to talk about people that are yesterday's people. The blame has to be laid very firmly at Sturgeon for where we are now. And some of that responsibility, or a large amount of it, also sits with Hunza Yousaf and with John Swinney and every single person that was in her cabinet or was a special advisor to her during the period of the collapse of the Scottish National Party. But they're yesterday's people. Who remembers the names of the 10 SNP? And in fact, who in 1981 remembered the names of the 10 SNP MPs that lost their seats in 1979? Nobody. And the quicker we forget who they are, the ones that are lost, and get ourselves fixed on the solution, not how we got here, because I've been doing this with you guys for over a year and a half now. And you could go back to programme number 1, which I think was during the leadership election. And nothing that we have said during that year and a half is wrong. All of it was helpful if people wanted help, if they wanted advice, if they wanted things to think about that maybe have changed the trajectory of what happened yesterday. That didn't happen. What we need to do now is, yes, let's apportion blame, but let's do it today and then forget them. They are yesterday's people. In the minds of the electorate, they're gone. Half the people that went out and voted yesterday put an X behind the box, and you ask them today, who did they vote for? They won't be able to tell you. They might be able to tell you the party, but they won't be able to tell you the name of the person. So let's forget the lot of them. They're a waste of space. They have abandoned the people of this country. They have betrayed the wishes and desires of the vast majority of independent supporters, and therefore, for me, they should never be mentioned again. Confined to the dustbin of history. That is the reality. But where do we go from here? When all I heard last night and today from John Swinney, from Mr. Flynn, and that despicable Empress of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, last night on television, was it wasn't me, a big boy did it and ran away. The fact of the matter is, until the membership and the supporters of the independence movement reject these people, then we are going absolutely nowhere. And to some degree, we need to educate our people into the simple, straightforward fact that if you play British politics by British rules, you will lose. They might give you a wee hit, a wee win for one election, but then you will lose because you threaten the integrity of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Never forget that. Sinn Féin don't forget that. But when was it the last time you ever heard any senior member of the Scottish National Party refer to the campaign for independence with a direct attitude towards the British government? They are our enemy. English voters are our enemy. And I don't mean that in a personal sense. I mean it in a very simple arithmetical sense. It is impossible for Scotland to be represented at Westminster when we can only deliver 56 members of Parliament out of 600 nods. You can never have a majority. We will always be with the begging bowl at the end of the table, catching the dropped salt. And until we approach our politics in a Scottish manner for the benefit of the future generations and the people here now, we're going to get beat continually. And in some ways, what we need to do is what was expressed by the valiant efforts of Eva Comrie and Sally Hughes, David Henry, and a number of others across the country, to actually have the guts to stand up and say, we need to rally round something else. And what we need to rally round is proper leadership. But more importantly, that leadership should be the idea of an independent Scotland, a member of the United Nations, taking its part in the world and building our own alliances, not what John Swinney and the leadership of the Scottish National Party want, which is a little mini England playing not on a world stage, but within a devolved United Kingdom. That's where we need to be heading, Roddy.
I agree. There's something in that, Ian, because if we look over in Northern Ireland, in the 6 occupied counties, the biggest party now is the Sinn Féin, the Abstentionists, who refuse to play the British game, who have always refused to play the British game. That's the way we should be going at. You know, I'm an abstentionist, Ian. Are you an abstentionist, or do you think we should keep trying hammering away at Westminster?
No, I don't think we should keep hammering away at Westminster at all. You know, I mean, I think, you know, we should refuse to take the oath. The way to do it is to put it on them. You know, if we get elected members who go down there when they're asked to take the oath, they say, no, he's not Scottish king. He's never taken the Scottish oath. My oath is to the people of Scotland. If that's unacceptable, then I won't be here. You know, and put it on them. But I'm going to put a wee bit of petrol on the flames now and talk about what I think's going to be the big crisis. Because I think the big crisis is coming next month. Because next month, the SNP by law have to hand in their accounts to the Electoral Commission for 2003. Now, I don't know what's in those accounts, but I'm willing to bet that the membership levy money is down a big time yet again. And, you know, there were 800,000 in deficit last year. They survived bankruptcy by changing the rules and taking the branches money to stay afloat. That's a one-time trick. You can't do that every year. You know, once the money's taken, once it's taken. So I think that's a huge problem. The only good news I've got for the SNP there is that the books for this year, 2004, aren't going to be due until the autumn of 2005. And they're going to show a whopping deficit because after last night, 80% of the millions of pounds that the SNP have been enjoying since 2015 in Westminster short money has gone because it's entirely based on how many MPs you return to the House of Commons. So they've been getting paid recently 48 times that levy. That's now 8 times that levy. Also, there's far fewer Westminster MPs, Phil will know about this, to make contributions to cover the costs of some of the things down there. Whereas there was 48. In future, there's going to be 8 or 9 maybe. You know, not enough money to do what they've been doing up until now. So there's going to be huge job losses. And you were right to mention the staff job losses because most MPs will probably have 3 or 4 full or part-time staff. They're all gone. So, I mean, that's about, my arithmetic, about 150, 160 folk that are suddenly no longer full-time political aides. and they're going to be replaced, because it's even worse, they're going to be replaced by 150 or 160 unionist full-time or part-time aides. So it's a political disaster on a huge, huge scale. And, nobody's talking about that, because they can't talk about that. They don't want ordinary members to know just what the impact of that defeat last night is. It's much wider than just the temporary loss of, as they'll present it, of 40 MPs. The other thing members should look out for is these MPs appearing before 2016.
26, you've got your dates all mixed up, mate.
Sorry, 2026. Looking for, I love 10 years ago. It's much happier times. Looking to go on the list for the Hollywood elections. They'll probably not want seats because they might not win the seats. They might quite fancy being on the list for the SNP now. My view is quite simple. If you lost your seat last night, no matter how good you are, you should not be on the list come 2026. You've had your shot. As Lloyd said, they took a back seat. They didn't intervene. They let the party down. They don't deserve to be there. There's plenty of good people in the SNP, more honest. The one thing I'll tell you is I expect fully this weekend that once our liberation elections are out the way, our website's going to be deluged with people joining Liberation and Salvo, because the people I talk, none of them ever want to see independence under the control of a single political party ever again. In fact, it goes further. They don't want to see it under any political party ever again. It must come under the control of the Scottish people. It must be the sovereignty of the Scottish people that determines what happens with independence. Popular democracy, your time has arrived here in Scotland. It must happen, and it must happen soon, or we can kiss independence goodbye.
Yeah, it's Phil. What do you see? Do you see anything that we can grab onto here to move forward?
Well, I think going from what Ian said, I think cat herders will be in the money big time, because there's beautiful concepts and principles out there, but the reality of and there's some very pure and wonderful work being done by some magnificent people, Salvo being one of the groups. But the reality in life and what you're dealing with and dancing with the devils that control this planet, there's a game you have to play. And for me, I mean, there are some really, really good moves and some really, really good initiatives, but getting all the people or enough people behind it to make a difference. I mean, we're all making a difference. Everything that everybody's doing here makes a difference. You turn one person towards the sunshine to see the light, and not listen to the media, and not listen to what the parties are telling you. You are making a difference, and I appreciate it and applaud everybody involved. But to get enough people around, and this is extremely difficult. As Alex, one of the most experienced and competent politicians we've ever had, has found he knows how difficult. He told me how difficult it is to start a new party. ISP have found out that they're just wasting their time. But I don't want to say that to the good people in ISP, because these are good people who believe in the right thing. They're being honest. They're being straightforward. They're trying their damnedest. And anybody that puts a leaflet through a door or speaks up for Scottish independence for the people of their country, the people who live and work here, and then they get my applause, they get my support, they get my respect. I don't have to agree with everything you think or everything you do, and I will not criticise those who fight for the freedom of Scotland. They are to be applauded and supported any way we possibly can. But understanding, having been, I liken it to have been to the Emerald City. When you get into politics, I actually went to see the Great Oz, and I saw the wee dog pull the curtain back, and it's all levers and honkers and fucking shite. It's the management of perception. So I know what it takes to persuade enough people, because everybody tells you they don't believe what the media. They don't believe what the media say, and yet when you engage them in political debate, especially unionists, all they do is reiterate what it doesn't matter if it's the red tops or the broadsheets, it's the same message. It's the same 6 billionaires that own 80% of the media in Britain, and that's the message that you're receiving. Where you're delusional enough to think that because you read the broadsheets and the red tops that you're actually getting both sides of the story, you're deluding yourself. Those of us on this show and those of us with experience understand that we know what was. Ian made some excellent points, and what he's saying is bang on the money. Now, we know this, but most of the punters don't. What's coming down the turnpike and the shit, we know what this means, this defeat means for the party that we built up. It's financial ruin. The short money, and Ian talked about it, and it's absolutely bang on the money again, from Ian, which is no surprise. We were told you will pay. You will pay a percentage of the money that you get to spend into the coffers of the SNP. And a number of us questioned this. Wait a minute, what are we getting? Because what we've found very, very quickly, and I alluded it to earlier, in fact I stated as much, there are favourites. There are those who had great experience and were not utilised to the skill set that they had, where we're not put in positions. I know more about energy than pretty much anybody in the SNP MPs or MSPs. Was I used in any of the senior positions? Nope, because I couldn't be trusted yet. I couldn't be trusted to do what I was told. And there were so many of us in that boat. And what we saw was, well, why am I giving support when people like Hannah Burdell are getting promoted beyond her ability? Because they control her. They know she'll do what she's told. And that's how politics work. And this carries on to why the SNP are in this mess. They are doing what they are told. This is the plan and the successful delivery of a plan that the unionists, that the establishment has made and executed to almost perfection. Because still the same shysters remain in control of the SNP, and they're still. I mean, you look at the numbers here. This wasn't the transfer of power was massive, but the total votes for Labour was 845,651. The total votes for the SNP, the sham that they are and the shysters that they are, was still only 708,759.
First past the post system, mate.
It's the system. When we play this system, we lose. We play by their rules. Everybody in this room, everybody on this podcast has said this before. We play by their rules, we lose.
Yeah, but
it's time we play by our rules. No, you carry on. No.
That 500,000 people in pro-independence supporters that stayed at home, if they had turned out, would have had 1.2 million people voting for the SNP, they would have landslided it.
If they had,
therein lies your problem.
Correct, and this because the SNP now, the reason we had the landslide in 56 is because what we were doing and saying resonated with the people after the 2014, almost pulling off the impossible. It was designed to be impossible to do, and everybody here, and the millions of other people who contributed in Scotland to that magnificent campaign for our independence and our freedom should be really proud, and you should understand the power that you have when we stand together. And the pain that we're going through now, seeing the party that we built being destroyed, because it is being destroyed, it has been destroyed, is because of the greed of a few at the hands of those who would keep us on our knees. And that party was the best vehicle, was an excellent vehicle for it, but we still need to do it through political parties. This is where I would disagree with Ian. It's the mechanism that exists, and if you don't win that game, and I would advocate the Sinn Féin philosophy 100%. We should mimic that. We should follow it, and we should use these initiatives from independent free thinkers and great minds like those that run Salvo, like those that run all the other initiatives. These are contributors and watchers watch us to make sure the parties that represent us don't do what the SNP did.
Yeah, you're right. Great minds that run Salo, and Ian as well. You meant to say that's what you said. Isn't that right, Ian?
Very kind, Roddy, very kind.
I try my best. The one thing I just want to point out is the Conservative vote dropped by 12.2%. The Labour went up with 17. So there's a lot of transfer. We know the Unionists do England United. And so a lot of those votes, I go back to the 500,000 that stayed at home. Now, Labour will tell us, Eva, that it was because they campaigned so hard and on the doors they were talking about change and everyone was fed up with the SNP, etc., etc., etc. And the SNP will be saying, oh, well, we've got to convince more people. But here, in my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, here's how the SNP lost this election. Because they gave up independence and instead went for gender ideology. They put in a hate crime bill that no one wanted. They did the GRRB that no one wanted. They pushed up devolution that we didn't want. They ignored every mandate that they were given. They used carrots. They left the core. That's why they lost last night, not because of any other reason. They gave up the ground that we have, which is independence, which is what the Scottish people want. Am I right? Am I wrong? Or am I doing it?
Definitely right. It was the SNP who lost it as opposed to Labour who won it in the main.
Correct.
The evidence for that comes from all the conversations on doorsteps with people who said that they had rarely seen anybody leaflet or canvass or actively campaign. What you had were jump and shout campaigns here and there, where you would have half a dozen photos taken by, Labour candidates in particular areas one Saturday morning and then drip fed out over a couple of days to make it look like they'd been all over the place. And then other parties caught on and they were doing the same thing. This was not a campaign of mass engagement by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
It suggests that party politicians were actually doing their best to dodge and to avoid the public because they didn't want to answer awkward questions, because they had no answers. It's like if you ask Labour, what are you going to do for Scotland? The answer is GB Energy. They can't tell you what GB Energy actually comprises. They talk in terms of a living wage and they talk about saving the NHS and what have you. But these are sound bites. There is no meat on the bones. There never will be meat on the bones because they don't have it in them. What should be happening is that the SNP, the Scottish Government, should be returning to providing a competent government. And John Swinney should sack his cabinet. Fall on his sword, collapse the Scottish Parliament, as I said before. If he's not prepared to do that, then he should replace his cabinet with people who actually know what they're talking about, who know the difference between men and women, and who are not in the main yesterday's men or tomorrow's women who have either done very little in the past, but it's kept them in the limelight, or they're the great hope for the future as yet unfulfilled. Scotland needs far more than the apologies that we've got for leadership at the moment within the Scottish Government. And if that begun to be addressed, it would provide a little bit of hope for those of us who want to see Scotland prosper within as well as out with a devolved settlement. There are things that are going to happen that are going to be very unpleasant. Ian Murray has been appointed the Secretary of State for Scotland. That's Ian Murray who thinks it's funny to pose in a suit made out of the Union Jack material. That on its own should be a bit of a message. And what will begin to happen is that money and resources will come from Westminster via the Scottish office to the Scottish office in Scotland and to local authorities. They will bypass Holyrood, and you will find that the Scottish Government becomes gradually over time emasculated, in essence politically castrated by a centralised Westminster Labour government. And that's a deliberate policy, setting up and creating the groundwork for Labour to pounce and try to take control of August 2026. So again, what the independence movement has to do is to take a leaf out of the Better Together book and collaborate and cooperate and actually have that constitutional convention. You don't even have to announce it publicly, Stephen or John, just set it up. Phone round the people within the movement that are known to be determined and courageous, competent and visionary, and create a network of almost guerrilla warriors who fight and negotiate and discuss and plan in the background, who have strategies worked out, who talk in terms of Scotland's potential and the positive nature of our campaigning for independence and the reason why we do what we do. Because we're not a normal political party or political movement. We're a movement for self-determination. It's a principled status, a principled movement to be in. And it's well past time that the people who claim to be part of that movement actually behaved like men and women of principle who put their country and their people before their party.
Hear, hear. Last night or this morning, Lloyd, John Swinney just said, we need to learn from this setback, listen to the public and pick ourselves up and go again and do the best for Scotland. Well, I responded to that and I suggested to Mr. Swinney that if he was serious, he should today, in fact, consign the GRRB and the hate crime bill to the bin. He should denounce the Stonewall queer woke theory. He should call a form of Scottish constitutional convention. That's what he should do. They won't do any of those things, will they?
No, because it was clear from the television coverage last night that the real leader of the Scottish National Party, irrespective of what the election told us, is still Nicola Sturgeon. That was absolutely clear from last night. John's weasel words, both last night and today, I mean, they cut no ice with me. They certainly cut no ice with the ordinary people. But the fact of the, let's look at this a bit more clearly. John can say that it's not John's fault, but John's been in the cabinet since yawned time, right? Since Moses was a boy. John can say that this was an election which was driven entirely by the situation in England and the failure of the Tories, right? Well, that's fine, because we don't have that many, just a few more Tories in Scotland now. But if he had approached this election from a Scottish basis rather than a British basis, then maybe the result would have been different. But John does not have the mental bandwidth to even think in that direction. That's the unfortunate facts. Now, whether or not that is an incapacity John has, whether it's a limitation John has, or it's what John is doing, what John gets told, I don't know. That's maybe something we need to look into. But we have 2 years effectively to gather together, to combine the forces, pro-independence forces, to enter the 2026 election and make it the independence election. I fear, unfortunately, that the current Scottish National Party leadership do not want that as an outcome. What they are seeing at the moment is they can't fight elections because they have no money. They're going to scrabble around trying to find money from different places, but they will not seek and reach out to anybody else. I mean, my major problem with that is that if you are, and I have never seen this in any members or leaders of liberation movements that I've met from across the world, from all parts of the world, none would approach the idea of devolution as being something to be treasured and developed. All of them see it as exactly what it is, a dirty, great big bear trap that when you try to get out of it, you'll bleed to death. And that's effectively what's happening to us. Where in 2015 was the plan B? If we had people who really understood the nature of creating an independent country, who were genuinely aware of the responsibilities they had as patriots to liberate their country, why was there no plan B in 2015? When I joined the Scottish National Party, a majority of members of the Westminster Parliament, because there was no Scottish Parliament, was the grounds for immediate negotiation for independence. How come we delivered 56 out of 59 in 2015 and nobody, including Alex Salmond, had the gumption to turn around and say, sorry, all bets are off. We're going back to the pre-1997 constitution of the Scottish National Party and we begin negotiations now. We'll be on the phone to the United Nations to arrange for a delegation of them to chair those negotiations. Where was that thinking? Absolutely bloody nowhere. Where is that kind of thinking now in the leadership of the Scottish National Party? Absolutely nowhere. It is essential that people who believe in independence, irrespective of party or non-party, that we find a way to move together, not by tying your flag to one particular mast, but understand we need to develop a broad mass movement. And the only way that is going to happen is by people standing up and saying, they were wrong, but maybe they'll be right in the future. But what we need to do as a people is move together to deliver what over 50% of the people of this country actually want. Now, that's not in the lexicon of our political commentators to continually remind themselves of that. And it's not in the interests of the Scottish National Party, who are trying as a bureaucracy to rebuild themselves, to talk about the extreme number of people who support independence. Though Swinney absolutely insultingly referred to that in his speech this morning when he effectively conceded that independence is off the table. It is not for John Swinney. It is not for Nicola Sturgeon. It is not for any elected politician at any level in any country in the whole of the United Kingdom to decide whether independence is off the table. Is that what they were saying when the British government banned Sinn Féin? Was Irish independence off the table? I don't think so. Scottish independence is an idea, and it's an idea in the minds of the people. It is not the preserve of the political class. It will not go away. It will have dips and troughs, as it always has done over the many hundreds of years that the movement has actually existed. The independence movement in Scotland does not exist because of the British system. It exists despite the British system.
Roddy's on mute.
Me a quid. Oh, me a quid. The unionists are in a glow just now, and rightly so, and they're having a great time. But I've said it, and I believe it. They're delusional, because Lloyd's alluded to it. If they think that we're going away or the independence movement is beaten, they just need. They won't. The media won't look at the figures and say, "Well, wait a minute. There's 500,000 of those bloody jocks are sitting at home just waiting for the opportunity, whether it be liberation, whether it be a political party, whether it be Holyrood. There's 500,000 just waiting to go. So for them to think that they've actually, by defeating the SNP, they've defeated independence, they're sadly mistaken.
Of course they are. Of course they are. I mean, what Phil's saying, I think Phil's misunderstanding what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the political parties will not bring us independence. That's the history of countries getting their independence. It's national liberation movements that get, United Nations recognition. You go that route, you increase the international pressure, you play on an international playing field, not on Westminster's playing field. That's where all the advantages come. We have now got a KC working on preparing the case for Scotland to go to the United Nations. We will be publishing shortly that KC's advice, and it will rock Scotland when it happens. And what I've seen this all before, in Estonia had great momentum created by the people, just like us in 2014. And then the political parties took over. And each of them all had their own individual idea about how they were going to deliver independence. And the momentum was all lost. And eventually the public had enough. And they said, a plague in all your houses. And the folk decided they were going to take over the independence fight. And what happened then was all these political parties that had all been fighting with each other all had to catch up with the public. And of course, independence was delivered. You had the Baltic chain, you had all these initiatives, imaginative initiatives that you couldn't do as a political party, but as a national movement you can. I mean, I'll give you one example. The Estonians signed up every Estonian to be an Estonian citizen because they argued that the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty was illegal and therefore Estonian citizenship still existed. Everybody said you won't be able to do that. It took them 6 months and they signed up 95% of the Estonians living in Estonia and issued them with Estonian documentation. Scottish citizenship was removed in 1707 with no, contact with the public. Scottish citizenship still exists. We could do the exact same thing. Can you imagine the impact in Scotland if we started a massive campaign to sign everyone up as Scottish citizens? It would put the fear of death into the Unionists. So there's plenty can be done. Plenty can be done. We should not get despondent. We should remember what happened in 2014. It wasn't the political leadership that run that wonderful campaign. No. It was the punters and the schemes. It was the punters up and down the land, the ordinary folk. They took control and they moved it along. That's what we need to do in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. Phil, the clock's beating us as always. Do you see any hope of the SNP party actually doing a bit of mea culpa and reaching out to the rest of the movement?
Well, first of all, mea culpa, because Ian's right. We are actually on the same page here, because you need both. You absolutely need both. You do need the political parties. It's not, and thankfully, I understand a fair bit of what Salva are doing and love what's going on, and others. There's been plenty of other initiatives we talked about, but do I see positivity and hope for the political parties? Only if they understand what Ian's just explained, and that we've been saying for a very, very long time, that you have to listen to the people and do what we tell you, not what our enemy is telling you to do. So I'm looking at an SNP leadership that will not turn. They will not turn from the course they've taken, because they don't have a choice. Nicola's in serious trouble. Every one of her supporters that she has got leverage on, and this is how politics works. People need to understand that. If you find someone, and the disgraceful thing about this, it used to be if you were gay because it was illegal in Britain. Let's not forget that. And there's a lot of gay people in politics. And if you knew they were gay and you had some evidence of that, you didn't destroy them. You kept them in power and used the leverage to control them. That's how politics works. That's how the 77th Brigade, MI5, MI6, that's how all of these people operate. So what we've got now is an establishment that has leverage over the leadership of the SNP. Because if you control Nicola, which they do, the leverage that she has by building those around her, she knows all the insights of Angus Robertson, of Humza, of John Swinney, all the shortcomings and all the leverage that parties keep to control. They keep information. They create, they generate, they leverage. Politics is dirty. It's real. The real politic. Most people, and I don't blame folk for not understanding this, because who's got the time? Who's got the time to look at the economics of a country or how the machinations of politics actually work? We're too busy getting on with our lives, and quite bloody right too, So for me, my hope is that the people force the parties to kowtow to our will, and that's what has happened to the SNP. The SNP have been beaten by the people of Scotland. Our own people, 500,000 didn't show up. Why? Because you betrayed us, and we know it. 500,000 of us now know this. SNP, and I mean the individuals, you, Angus Robertson, you, Nicola Sturgeon, you, every single one of you that betrayed us, to hell with you. And I don't want you in politics ever again. I will hunt you down. I mean, I'm not threatening anyone, but I'm telling you, you will not get away with this. You bastards will not get away with this. What you've done to our people, and the pain and suffering you're putting the Scottish people through because you're a selfish bunch of greedy bastards, not acceptable. Sorry, apologies. Right, but you know where I'm going with that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we always know where you're going with that. The clock's beating us. We'll finish off. I've got to just say, one should, I'm saying about the unions shouldn't gloat, or I said they should gloat, have your moment. I want to gloat. I'm glad that people like Alan Smith and Nicholson and MacDonald and a lot of the other wokerati are out, gone, don't come back. You caused this demise. You destroyed a party that I spent over 5 centuries. I'm a bit older. 5 decades in, and I've played catches up you. And helped, as we've all said, all of us built it. We go back, some of the war stories this group's got here, going back to by-elections in the 70s and 80s. We built that party, and people like you, shits like you, destroyed it. Go do something else. Get your red coat out, McDonald, and go way back and go to some holiday camp because you're useless for anything else. But this is just our first pass at it, folks. We'll be back on Sunday with more. But until then, and we've got a big thing to tell you, we have something we're going to release on Sunday that will help our fight and struggle. We're going to show you a fantastic tool that the people of PRISM, the people from Not My Parliament, and the Indie for Indies have produced on their own without anyone else's help, and you're going to love it. And to release that on Sunday. Until I see you then, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.